I think we're ready to start, so I just want to ask anyone standing, if you plan to stay a while, it'd be great if you took a seat. And can you all hear me? Maybe we should test the PA real quick. Say hello. Can you hear? Okay. Okay, well, I want to start by welcoming you all here to CalState University, Los Angeles. It's wonderful to have you here on our campus. I want to, of course, welcome the students who are here, as well as the many community members and colleagues from other universities who are joining us, and of course, the Mujeres del Movimiento in the audience and here on our panel. Thank you so much. It's an incredible honor to have this panel today. It's just so powerful to be sitting here next to these 5 women, and I know as I look out and I see women in the audience that I know have made such an incredible difference. And in fact, if it weren't for the work that you did for the men and women of the Movimiento, I would not be here as a Chicana professor in the first Chicano Studies department that was founded in 1968. So I just want to thank you for the work that you did. I think of it every day. I'm going to be emotional now because we can't forget. We cannot forget that the reason why we have the opportunities we have is because of the doors that you all work so hard to open. So thank you. This event is sponsored, in fact, by the Department of Chicano Studies here at CalState LA by the Instructionally Related Activities Grant. And I just want to acknowledge the role of the Instructionally Related Activities Grant in making these educational panels possible. I also want to make a quick pitch for the East Los Angeles Archives that we've just started here on campus. There are pamphlets up at the back. There's a little table over there. We were very blessed to, in fact, have our first archive submitted and processed, and that is the archive of Gloria Arellanes. Thank you, Gloria. And there's just some wonderful materials in there. I don't know, maybe it's me, but I love things like seeing an armband from the original Moratorium, or some of the buttons, or the Poor People's Campaign lunch ticket, and of course the photographs and the many manuscripts and pamphlets that are there. So we'd love to invite you to join Gloria in donating your collection. This archive is very focused specifically on activism in the East Los Angeles area. I also want to point out the Special Collections Librarian who is here, Renee James. And she will be here to talk to you if you want to touch base with her on the possibility of reviewing your archives and maybe depositing them here at CalState LA. I also want to point out Dr. Romelia Salinas, who is in the library at CalState LA, who is also working with the East Los Angeles Archives. So, why are we here? We're here to hear this. Why are we here? We're here to hear the stories. But before getting there, I feel like I need to tell you a little bit about the trajectory to get to this day and this panel. Well, of course, it all started in the Movimiento, but that's not the class I'm teaching right now. But in fall of 1968, we had a panel on UMAS, United Mexican American Students. CalState LA was the site of a very active UMAS chapter, and in fact, the first president, Phil Castruita, is with us today. And Phil did a wonderful job of moderating that panel with several members of UMAS at the time. He showed us pictures of Bobby Kennedy eating huevos rancheros at a Mexican restaurant somewhere nearby. Vicky Castro was there. And I think it reminded all of us, the students and myself, of the central role that CalState LA has played in the local movimiento. Cindy came to me in spring. ¿Dónde está Cindy? There she is. There she is. I said, I have an idea for a series of educational panels. And I was like, okay, what are you thinking? And she was willing, she had all these contacts. She works with Rosalio Munoz. Where's Rosalio? We have to acknowledge Rosalio. So she had all these contacts and she had these great ideas. And I said, okay, I'm there to support you, Cindy. let's see what you can do. And she has just done such an incredible job in putting these panels together. So in fall 1969, we had a panel on the movement in Los Angeles in fall of 1969, moderated by Jesus Trevino. In winter, we had a panel on La Raza, moderated by Felix Gutierrez, with Raul Ruiz, Patricia Borjo Lopez, so the original people who worked on that radical Barrio newspaper. And we're here today at the final lecture of this year for this panel on women of the movement. And I know that we've all been anticipating it. I know Cindy and I have been saying, yes, we can't wait. What's that panel going to look like? How are we going to put it together? And we've just been so excited by the response. And we really hope this is the first of several panels that focus exclusively on the activism of women. Because as many of you probably know, when you open up your Chicano history books, out of 300 pages, maybe there's 5 pages or less, right? Or you might look in the footnotes. Maybe you'll find some reference to the Chicanas of the Movimiento there. Now there's a new generation of Chicana professors who are starting to look at this history, and I definitely want to encourage the students out there to consider investigating this history and to think about how can we facilitate that these stories are not forgotten, that these stories are shared. So with that, I would like to introduce the moderator for this evening. Irene Tovar, unfortunately, is not feeling well, so she could not be with us today. But Cindy Aragon, who has been the magic behind this series of panels, is with us. So I'm very excited. Let's give Cindy a big hand for all the work that she's done.
So thank you, Dion, for your support from day one, from last year since I met you to the present. Thank you also to the Chicano Studies Department for always backing us up, supporting us, and always being available and helpful. So I am Cindy Aragon. I'm a post-baccalaureate student here at CalState LA in a Chicano Studies degree. And the first thing I wanted to mention was that a couple of hours ago, about 2 hours ago, CalState LA had their 12th annual Distinguished Women's Award ceremony. And right now, with this event that we're having on women of the Chicano movement, in reality, what we're having right now is we're holding our first Distinguished Women of the Chicano movement ceremony. Thank you all, those of you that are here. I know that there's also a lot of people watching us online. We're live on the internet right now, so anyone with an internet connection and flash on their computers could watch us online. So hello to all of you too. In addition to that, I want to thank Erin Sanchez, who's helping us broadcast this event online, and then Jose Luis Sedano, who's with the camera as well. Thank you, Rosalio, for agreeing to photograph this event. And in addition, I want to thank Rosie Bermudez. She's my coworker, and she just finished writing her master's thesis also in Chicano Studies. Thank you for, she's the one that put up these wonderful pictures on the wall. Okay, so for today's panel, we have 4 series of questions, and the way that we're going to do it is we're going to have, for those 4 questions that you have in front of you, you'll all have 15 minutes to answer. I'm going to read the questions, that way the audience also knows what they are. The first one, what was your role during the Chicano movement? The second, what was the role of women during the Chicano movement? The third one, were you involved in women's organizing? And lastly, what's the legacy of the Chicano movement? Okay, the first speaker for today will be Lydia Lopez. She was involved with Católicos por la Raza. She was also the first Chicana to serve in a grand jury. She also served as the president of the United Neighborhood Organization known as UNO. While a member of the Church of the Epiphany, She also worked in UNO. So, Lydia, what was your role during the Chicano movement?
First of all, I want to say, can you hear me?
Yeah.
A little bit? Oh, is this on?
You go on. You're fine.
Thank you. I want to say that it's difficult being up here. What?
Okay, do a test.
Test. 1, 2, 3. There we go. That it's difficult being up here when there are so many women sitting right in front of us that could have this spot. There are remarkable women that we are facing that also need to have their stories told. So I don't know how you went about selecting us, but anyway, here we are. I can talk now because what do they say in law enforcement? That the statute of limitations. And maybe now we can talk about some of the things that we did. Maybe. But for me, it was a funny start of my involvement in the movement. I was working with the Welfare Planning Council, and I was doing some work in East Los Angeles. And my supervisor said, "Hey, come with me to the demonstration." And I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, let's go over to the Hall of Justice. There's a demonstration going on. Join me." Now, mind you, I was in the sociologist mode. I had on a 3-piece knit suit and heels. And I went to the first demonstration I had ever been to. And it was around the Hall of Justice. It was about the Chicano 13. I happened to marry one of those later on, but that's another story. Statute of limitations. And I went, and I was so intrigued by it. First of all, I was very embarrassed. I was hoping nobody would see me. And I was carrying a picket sign kind of in front of my face, because I was really just kind of it was awkward for me. So I looked around who was in marching, and I saw a Baptist minister, a Presbyterian minister, I saw 3 Episcopal priests, and I go, how interesting, because the way I had been raised as a Baptist, you didn't get involved in stuff like this. You went to church and you prayed and you thanked God for your wonderful life, and you went home and you had a wonderful life. So what I did out of my own natural curiosity, I started interviewing these folks. And I started talking to them, especially the Baptists. Remember Reverend Quiñones? And remember Bahag? And remember George Cole, the Presbyterian? And Ollie Garver, Roger Wood, John Luce, the Episcopalians. So I started finding out what was going on, and I tell people I was just sucked in. There was not much I could do to resist this, because I was becoming also more comfortable with my skin, having been raised away from East Los Angeles, and now seeing how I could do something that had some value. I became involved in Católicos por la Raza, because I was married to one of those Católicos por la Raza. And, they say the family that, goes in picket lines together stays together. Don't believe it. But I fell in love with one of the Chicano 13, and he then became involved in Católicos por la Raza. And I remember the night of 1969 when we go down Wilshire Boulevard. And, I was told that night, we're going to go to Mass. So I said, okay, what did I do? I put on a hat, I had on a swell dress, I was wearing heels again. And I had a swell coat, and I looked really terrific, because I thought, well, Catholics, they go to Mass, and they have hats on, and they're very respectful and all that. Well, here we are, a few thousand of us, walking down Wilshire Boulevard in heels. And we get to St. Basil's, and there's all sorts of activity, and there are people in this audience who were, in fact, I'm looking at one, who were arrested that night. But all sorts of activity, and then here come the police in gear, and all of a sudden, my husband says, "Go stand across the street." I was very obedient at that time. Go across the street and hold on to these things. So most of the the men that were involved in the leadership of Católicos por la Raza were giving me their wallets and their keys. And this was before cell phones, so we didn't have any of those. I'm sure I was holding on to all this stuff, and I was across the street watching the police come, and all of a sudden, all this commotion in front of the church, and crash bang, and then before we know it, we're on the telephones that night trying to raise bail, and the next morning we go to the women's jail and get Alicia out and work through the night, because the next day is Christmas, and we had to tend to the children, Alicia's children, and make sure that Christmas was good for them. The one thing that happens is that a month later, one of our attorneys calls us on the phone and says, "There's a warrant out for your arrest." And I go, "What? My arrest?" And I go, "Yes, your arrest and Fred's and it mentions all these people, 21 of us." And that's because they had taken pictures of us the days after the demonstration at St. Basil's. The police were there across the street every day taking pictures, and they used those pictures to figure out who they was going to be arrested. And so we decided all to gather. We gathered at the house of one of the defendants and said, "Okay, what are we going to do? Are we going to go underground? Are we going to do something?" So it was decided we would all go to the jail and turn ourselves in. And I was pregnant with my child at that time, and my bail was raised by the Church Women United, the Negro, the National Council of Negro Women, and the National Council of Jewish Women, because I had been working on a program to try to get lunches for children, things that think, wow, this is the ancient history, and it is. And so when we went to the jail, they had my bail. And Oscar Acosta, our attorney, said, "Mrs. Lopez cannot be arrested. She's going to have her baby any day now." Not true. And so what the police did is they patted my belly to see if, in fact, there was anything there. And they, don't look like she's going to. And so I was processed, and along with Alicia and a nun that was arrested with us. We went through the whole delousing process and all of that. Later on in the trial, as I'm getting bigger and bigger, the boys say, "Lydia, have the baby in court. It'll be good for the movement." My wonderful macho brothers. But as the trial was going on, it was getting bigger and bigger. So when I got to the point that I was going to testify, I waddled. I really milked the scene. I waddled up to the seat, and they said, and I told my testimony. Well, the police had pictures of me because they had taken pictures that evening, and I had a hot pink turban on and a hot pink dress and a white coat, and so they had pictures of me over there, and so that was one of the compelling pieces of information that they had. One of the jurors afterwards, when we have the end of the trial and I'm found not guilty, he says, "Oh, I wasn't going to let you have your baby in jail. No, sirree, I wasn't going to let that happen." I go, "Thank God." So just to finish, the legacy is you. The legacy is Chicano studies. It's bilingual education. It's attention given to our people, and the fight goes on. My gosh, the fight goes on.
Gloria Arellanes. She was a Minister of Correspondence and Finance in the Brown Berets, the only female minister in the Brown Berets. And she, while in the Brown Berets, she coordinated, actually during the Brown Berets and also after the Brown Berets, she coordinated the East Los Angeles Free Clinic. She helped found Las Adelitas de Aztlán in 1970, an all-female anti-war group. And she later joined the Chicano Moratorium Committee as well. So Gloria, you're next.
Thank you, Cindy. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
My role in the Chicano movement was initially, I had come from the San Diego Valley, El Monte, and I had done a lot of work in high school. We had race riots in El Monte, so it was Chicanos versus white, and the only people who got arrested were the Chicanos. So that was kind of my background. So one of the things we did on the weekends was cruise Whittier Boulevard. And we were, I don't know how, we wound up at the Piranha Coffee House. The Piranha Coffee House. And we went inside, and I was with Andrea and Esther Sanchez, who were Brown Beret women also. And all these young people were sitting in the dark, and kind of like, what's going on, you know, and they're talking about, you know, their organization, and this was when they were first starting to talk about developing the Brown Berets. And it was very, very radical for me. It was very different from anything I had ever heard, having come from a kind of a community organization as a youth person. And I was very young at that time. And sitting in the dark, the sheriffs were going by, flashing, putting their floodlights in there, spotlights, I think they're called. And, you know, people just kind of would just stay really still, very quiet. This happened every weekend. And they would keep asking us, and we kept going back every weekend. They would say, would you like to join? And, well, I need to know a little bit more, because it was just so different. And eventually we did join, the three of us ladies, and, you know, we started doing all our communications. We got training from David Sanchez, and we would go into the community on marches, to meetings, and always very, very active. And we would go to people who did not like the word Chicano. They would get our flyers and wad them up in our face and throw them down, Chicano. And, you know, we were taught, don't argue with them. That cuts off your channel of communication. So we just were persistent at what we did, and within time it changed. Our role as women in that organization was very difficult. Very, very difficult. It was always a struggle. You have to remember, this was a paramilitary group. We wore uniforms. We marched, you know. There was a lot of undercover law enforcement in that organization. And, you know, we had chapters all over. And one of the things I did as an organizer was help develop those chapters. And when I went to the Poor People's Campaign, there were 6 of us that went. I was the only female. We went across the nation, and it was so educational to learn about so many people from different backgrounds. We developed a lot of chapters on that trip, and I remember New Mexico specifically, and was able to go back and retouch with those people, and those chapters were going. And in the state of California, we traveled almost every other weekend, going back and forth. For women, I have pictures in this collection that I donated, where we had a conference, a Brown Beret conference at Father Luce's church, and it showed all the men sitting around the conference table. Okay, and one woman taking notes. Okay, then I have all these pictures of all the Brown Beret women in the back cooking. That was our role. Very sexist, absolutely. But we did not know that. Okay, we were not aware of women's liberation. To us was a very white thing. It was burning the bras. It was, you know, this rebellion. We were not that, and we did not do that. We always believed in this concept that we're united, we walk beside our man. In reality, we're walking behind. Okay, and me as a minister, the only national minister in this organization, I was nothing but a glorified secretary. Okay, one thing I have to say, when I did sit and meet with the men, I felt I was listened to, or I made them listen to me. My size speaks for me. Okay, and people tend to judge me by my size as being, kind of overbearing or powerful or something, but, I used it, okay? And we did, like I was a newspaper, we would sit and do this, all the women would come together and do this, and they'd come and say, we don't want this, and they well, that, fight on. And we had the clinic, the women ran the clinic, did all the work, I got all the donations. I had the County of Los Angeles say, what do you need? Because people that came to us did not go to the County of Los Angeles health clinics, and they knew that. So, and I didn't require people to give me their name or show ID. I didn't care if their name was Spiderweb. To me, it wasn't important. What was important was to get their health service. And we were able to provide a lot of health services, and it was a struggle to even do that in the community because we went door to door, where we set our clinic on Whittier Boulevard, and we told people, they were afraid of us, because we were viewed as a militant group, that we carried guns, and that we were violent. Not so, maybe some of it, but not so. In the clinic, it was very important for me to have a clean clinic to give people services with dignity. And this is what we did. So it took a while to build, but it was built. And so in some of my pictures in the collection, it shows where people would go there, I guess, on the weekends, and there'd be blood all over. They'd be injured and go there. I remember a lot of people who were into drugs would come, they were dying from an overdose, and we were able to take them to a hospital, no questions asked. And so we built that kind of confidence in the community to come to us, and that clinic still exists today. And it's not as grassroots as we did, because we had nothing when we started that clinic. I eventually went off, left the Brown Berets, went to the Chicano Moratorium, and we did a lot of work with that. I traveled every other weekend to Oakland, San Francisco, Redwood City, always traveling, taking our film. We would ask people to do backyard meetings. Invite all your neighbors, your families, bring the popcorn if you want, we'll bring the film. And so we would go and talk about the Chicano Moratorium. And that created such a great response. I've never seen such a big response in the community as that one moratorium, the last one. The one in the rain, we had already left the Brown Berets, and we were under the banner of Las Adelitas de Aslan. And it was pouring rain. Our sign was kind of dripping. And the humming that you hear, that is us, because we didn't know the words to this. It sounds great, right? There was another moratorium, I believe it was the first one, and it was at Oberlin Park.
Yeah.
Okay. I went and got that permit. Okay, and I had to go before LAPD Police Commission, and I did not represent myself. Say this now, Lydia. I did not represent myself as a Brown Beret. I went as a community person in East LA. And I had somebody on that commission say, oh, these people want to have this. Oh, they deserve to have this. Yes, indeed. And, we got our permit. And so we marched as Brown Berets there. And we read the names of all the Latinos that had been killed in Vietnam. At the memorial, we had this huge list, and we just read these names.
Yeah, can you tell us also a little bit about the tank on September 16, 69? Okay.
Okay. One of the things I did, and it's my favorite story to tell, is riding the tank down what is now Cedar Chavez Boulevard. It was Brooklyn at the time. And somehow through the clinic, I got the Army Reserves to donate a tank to be in the September 16th parade. And our banner was the War on Disease, East LA Free Clinic. Okay, so how legitimate, right? So because they couldn't run the tank on the concrete, on the paved, on the blacktop, we got a flatbed. Okay, so we started, and we went out there with our beautiful shawls, and the men wore, their jackets, and then the LAPD marching group was either in front or in back. I just know I saw a lot of very angry faces, because as we started to move, we took off these shawls and rebosos and revealed that we had brown beret jackets on, bush jackets, and we put our hats on. and we were on top of this tank, and they were very, very angry. Well, as we were going through the parade route, people were jumping onto the tank. You know, they were part of the movement. Hey, you know, right? And it became a mountain of Chicanos, you know. But on this mountain of people, several of us brown berets were very, very large. Okay, very, very large. My brother, myself, Andrea, Esther, several, Yolanda Solis, some other names that come to mind. And the beautiful people on the sidelines, somebody started yelling, "Viva las gordas!" And I started to shrink. There was no more yelling Chicano power and Viva la raza. It was now. And this just, everybody, once they heard that, everybody down that parade line just did that. Okay, so that was our parade. Riding down that street on that float on a tank. And by the end, the man that was driving was just, I think, having a nervous breakdown because it became just a mountain of people. Oh, it was so much fun. I don't know if any of you were on there. It was a lot of fun. We did a lot of fun things, but we did a lot of serious things, and we did a lot of things that were new to the community, and I was able to see a movement developed from the Brown Berets to the Moratorium Committee, the organizing techniques that haven't brought people out, and it was wonderful to see that, and you knew your work was effective. Okay, you weren't always liked, like in all organizations. With, you know, we have battles, and we never agree with one another, and we're going to fight about it. But no matter what, that time period, everything that was done for education, for housing, for health, for people in the jails were suffering. I remember going on hunger strikes. You know, all those things we did, the protests, the marches, going up to San Francisco for the anti-war marches, going to Poor People's Campaign, that all brought about change. And sadly, what I see 40 years later is it's coming undone. Education is suffering, health is suffering, housing is suffering. You know, people are having a lot of difficulties, and it's almost like, you know, we say in the Native American community, you make a full circle. Well, I see that circle coming about again to where what we worked for 40 years ago, you have to do it now again. And it's a very different time, but, you know, I hear agreement out here, so it's time to work again. But it's nice to let the younger people do it.
Thank you, Gloria. Our next speaker is Vicky Castro. She was the president in the Young Citizens for Community Action. This group, in case you didn't know, later became the Young Chicanos for Community Action, the precursor to the Brown Berets. So she was the president. And aside from that, she was also active in the East Los Angeles school walkouts, and she also served in the LA Unified School District Board of Education. So, Vicki.
Thank you. I want to echo some of the comments. There are so many women and other activists, male activists out there that really are just so, as I look at the room, it's just so rich in history out there. And I guess I'll begin where my beginning came. I was a senior at Roosevelt High School in East Los Angeles, and I was selected to attend the first Mexican American Youth Leadership Conference that was held in Hess Kramer. And that was such an awakening for me, having attended all East Side schools. I had never even understood the word minority. I went to school with Mexican students, with Mexican American students, with Chicano studies students, and we were always the majority of the school, so I had no concept of minority. And that conference was county-wide, so they had us, you know, share a lot of our high school issues and concerns, and that's when I started to realize late in the game as a 12th grader that there was, even though I didn't think I was a minority, that there had been institutionalized racism at Roosevelt. I would be in an algebra class, and there would only be 2 Chicanos in the class. Everyone was either the few Jewish students that were left or Japanese. I recall when I had the grades to go on to a 4-year college, and that year when I went to ask the counselor, it was that whole thing about, well, maybe you should go to them, they were called community colleges, and maybe if you do well there, then you could transfer to a 4-year college. So after that opening and understanding of the things that affected not only myself, but all of my classmates at Roosevelt, I continued to work with the County Commission on Human Relations, and I went back to the camp as a peer counselor. And through that and more friendships being developed with students in East LA, we used to meet at Laguna Park, and we organized Young Citizens for Community Action. And there on that organization, we took up many issues, and I was just trying to brainstorm all the crazy things we used to try to work on. We did do quite a few food can drives. We'd go door to door collecting food cans to send to the farm workers and the Cesar Chavez movement. Every other weekend was a knock on doors, and I remember especially walking the hills of El Sereno and City Terrace and just collecting cans and sending them. We also worked on police brutality issues and different things of that nature, but we were very, probably very lucky, because we also worked out of the Church of the Epiphany and met Father Luce and Father Woods, and we were very young. And I want to throw out some names of Young Chicanos for Community Action: David Sanchez, Rachel Ochoa, Paula Crisostomo, Ismael Parra, Becky Reza, the Hidalgos. We were just all from the neighborhood. Well, we got the movement in us, and so we did a name change, and we became Young Chicanos for Community Action. And when we became Young Chicanos for the Community Action, coffee houses were the in thing in other communities, so we went to search out and open our own coffee house. At that time, I was the only one over 21, so I signed the lease on the Lafayette. So I also bought all the booze. I was the only one over 21. I guess I was contributing to everybody's delinquency. Statute of limitations. Okay, so there were just so many different things. I had been a student at CalState LA and would float in and out of classes here. And so as I guess like Gloria started to participate more in the activities, and others that started hanging out at La Piranha, I was getting pressure from my home to return to school. So then I started CalState LA, and UMass was available for participation. And so many activities. But I guess what I was very fortunate when we were Young Chicanos and for Community Action, that we did go through a very intensive training at Father Luce's church, and we were trained by Cesar Chavez's organizers. And the one thing that I never was able to do that he taught us was to give up my car. He had said if you were a true organizer, you needed to give up your car and ask for rides, because that was just an added opportunity to talk and to dialogue and to personalize your cause. Well, since I was the only one that owned a car, as I was the only one that owned the car, I would have to pick up everybody and go to, take them to meetings. And so I used to have this route where you go through, you know, pick up Montezuma Esparza, so then you go to David's, and then you go get Rachel and whatever. And so we used to pack anywhere from 6 to 8 people in an old, what is it, those little cars that have the motor in the front instead of the back, no, in the back, Corvair, Monza, whatever. And so if it was unbalanced, we would spin. And you had to add a can of oil every day. That was the movement car for many, many years. But once I was here at CalState, I still tended to work on educational issues, and I was very fortunate in the sense of I did have the relationship with the Brown Berets. I did have relationships at Father Luce as I was here at CalState, but I always tended to land up on the educational issues, always trying to improve education. So those organizing skills came through prior to the actual walkouts, and I remember I was the only one that was working for Allen Unified already, so I had a school playground director. I could open any gate; they were on the same key system. I could, you know, get then mimeograph things rent off, and so the surveys that we took prior to the walkouts, we would go visit team posts, which were part of the Johnson era's war on poverty, and they were team posts all over the community, and we'd go give our pitch, what we were doing, trying to improve, and we would actually tally, you know, what were the major concerns. Of course, it was mostly understanding that our kids were pushed out, no counseling, no encouragement to go to college, no scholarship, very few Latino teachers, no, so it would all come. And then there were so many different, and there's so many people in here that played so many roles in organizing the walkouts, and you were assigned schools, and you were assigned tasks, and parents. And my task on the very first walkout was to, I had applied for a teaching assistant position at Lincoln High School. So at the time of the walkout, I was to have an appointment with the principal to be interviewed. So I did have my appointment, and you know, walkout was supposed to be at 9 o'clock, and I'm sitting in the main office, and I'm to occupy him, and he's going in and out of there, and I'm sitting there, and I'll be right with you, miss, I'll be right with you, miss, and I'm going in, and I see Joe Russell go by, you know, this, that, and finally, you know, I know what schedule was 9 o'clock, but at 5:02 they started walking out. And so then he just ran into the office, very kind man, said, we'll have to reschedule. So then I just walked out. So there were a lot of, you used all kinds of things to do. I think when you talk about moments of fear, there was one scene at the Church of the Epiphany where we were working on police issues, and this was Chicanos and Brown Beret type members. I don't know if we had already transitioned. And we had the chief of police, it was Chief Reddy, in there, and we decided to keep him hostage. And I think somebody burned a couch out front of the church. Thank heaven this was before those SWAT teams came in, because I'm sure we would have been taken out easily. But, you know, we locked the doors and he heard our issues, and when we opened the doors, there were more police cars than I'd rather, you know, recall them. So I think I went out the back door and everybody, you know, let's get into my car and leave. So there's many things that I participated, but I always tended to go to education, and that was sort of, I guess, my pathway. And that throughout the days of the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and I'm still working on it, you know, to this, and it is a very sad point to hear what's going on in our schools today, and less services. I didn't go to an overcrowded school. I didn't go to a hostile environment that I was aware of. There was lots of things that we thought we could do to improve, but the situation of crowded schools, crowded colleges, you know, just didn't exist. And I think I'm starting to ramble, so.
I have a follow-up question for you, Vicki. So, based on your story of, let's say, working with Young Citizens for Community Action, it appears as though everyone, male and female, were doing pretty much the same thing. Did I get that correct, or was there ever any friction?
I think at the beginning, there were so few at the beginning, where I'm talking about 64, 65. I didn't really face within the organization any gender issues. At home I did. I had 4 brothers and a dad, so that's being like raised by 5 fathers. I was in the middle of all this movement and had a 12 o'clock curfew, while my 12-year-old brother had none. So it was more of expectations, and you know, you weren't brought up to be loud with a microphone leading a chant and at a picket line and things like that. So those kinds of confrontation. And then parallel to that is that another cousin was in the East LA Sheriffs and later became the captain of the East LA Sheriffs. And when he would spot me, he'd go to arrest me and would blow up family ties. You know, we couldn't have weddings and baptism with us both being invited. So all that kind of controversy that really came, the gender issue really came from the family roots versus, you know, I guess the guys that I hung around with in the YCCA, the Brown Berets, whatever, as Gloria, you just made yourself heard, and they would do it, or else they put you in front, you know, and that, you know, you were like less likely to be targeted than they were. And so I do remember those kinds of roles, and I do remember when we were in the courtroom when the 13 were being charged, and the bailiff made a big huff about having all the Brown Berets remove their beret. And then I had one hat and one, and then I put it on, because I was a female, I could wear a hat. And so those are little fun things that you got to do. But, so.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Ana Nieto Gomez. She helped found Las Hijas de Cuauhtémoc at CalState Long Beach. She established the first Chicana feminist journal, Encuentro Femenil, and she was also active in the Chicana Service Action Center and the Chicana Welfare Rights Organization. Go ahead, Ana.
Hello, everybody. I'd like to say hello to all the people here I haven't seen in so many years. I'm so happy to see you. And don't leave without giving me your phone number. Well, I would say that what you've heard so far is kind of the context that I kind of stepped in. I'm not from Los Angeles. I'm from San Bernardino, or from Purdue. And San Bernardino was a segregated town, and when I grew up, and we knew about it. Overt racism was just flaunted in our faces. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And to kind of like memorialize how overt it was is that the 15, you know, the old 66 freeway, it became the 15 going through Barstow, not the 215, but the 15. Well, that freeway went along the lines of the railroad, and the Chicanos lived on the west side of the railroad, and the blacks who came, I don't know really when they came, but as far as my knowledge or awareness, they came we were here, the West Side community was here, and then in the new community further down near the Muscoy, which was called kind of like Okieville. So between Okieville and the Chicanos, the black community was beginning to grow, and that was primarily middle-class blacks from retirees or civilians working at Norton Air Force Base. But getting back to my point is that the freeway, if you ever drove down that freeway, you would notice that if you ever wanted to get off between, let's say, Muscooby and Mill Street, the off-ramps, you know, usually on the freeway, if you're going this way, which is south or somewhere, is going this way, you get off on the exit right here, no? But in Purdue, because what that would do is that would, if you got off on right exit, then that would feed business to the west side. And the west side were the Mexican-American, Chicano entrepreneurs. And they had a lot of businesses established there off Mount Vernon, and they had become well known through Route 66, because the movie stars and the celebrities would stop there on 5th and Mount Vernon and to eat and, you know, party, and they got to know our community. And the fathers of Purdue didn't want that to continue. So so they worked with Caltrans to ensure that that business, that market or the customers would dry up so that they would get off on the left side. So if you wanted to go that way, or you were going this way, you would have to get in the fast lane, what we call the fast lane, in order to get off, in order to prevent any business going to the west side. And like, you know, we all know that, like my dad, he worked at Norton Air Force Base, and sometimes he worked late. And we would worry because there was I don't believe there was any laws. It was just established social policy, and that I have to hurry up. Okay. Anyway, you know, we were afraid that my father would get pulled over by the police and taken to the orange groves and beaten up, or taken to the wash and beaten up, so that if you were not on the west side at sundown, you were in peril. You were in peril. And the law was usually the person that you were in peril of. So anyway, I ended up going to CalState Long Beach because a friend of mine needed somebody to go with her, so I went with her. I didn't know what I was doing. And it was there that there was like 36,000 people. I was extremely homesick, wanting to go home badly, and I saw this big sign that said CHICANO, and I had never ever seen that spelled out, never. And what it was a young man called Danny Chavez, and he was recruiting for the Chicano students to come and meet and for a UMAS meeting. And so I was so depressed that I was wearing a raincoat, and underneath I had pulled up my pajamas, and it was hard for me to even to get to school. And so when I saw that, I was so happy. I started jumping up and down, and he saw my pajamas because I had rolled them up and they came down. And that was the beginning of UMAS at CalState Long Beach. And there was maybe, I don't really remember, but it was a small circle of men and women. And most of us went to night school because it was so hard to get a class in your major. So you were just treading water until you could actually get in your major. And we established UMAS. From UMAS, we established MECHA. From MECHA, we worked with even though there was no internet or cell phones, there was a lot of communication, And the person who had the car was the most important person on every campus. So I would say that my primary experience was in the campus. And we went to all the campuses. Here in LA, we had a Mecha Central, and the Mecha Central had a representative from each Mecha, the community and the state colleges and the universities. And then we would go to other Mecha Centrals in San Diego and Fresno and Berkeley. We were just traveling all the time. I don't know how I made it to school, but we did. And in the beginning, like she said, there was just a few of us. And when there was a few of us, there was no differentiation as far as the women do this and the men do that. But once we got a trailer, once we got money to establish an organization, then the differentiation arose was different. You know, the men were supposed to, they were men, they were young boys, now that I look back at it. They were young boys, young men, just trying out their adult shoes and being Mecha leaders. And me and my buddy, Corinne Sanchez, who's over there talking to somebody, I think, is we had been there. We were like the first Chicanos who had been there in the beginning. So we were veteranos. We were the peers of the men. And so what ended up happening is we ended up having to explain what the new student, Chicano women, were saying. Well, what did they mean when they said this? And what did they mean when they said that? And we said, well, ask them. He says, no, you tell us. You know, we don't have time to talk to them. You know, we're too busy. And through that effort, we started to talk to the women, and the women had all kinds of questions. So we said, well, you know, raise your questions at the meetings or get involved. And they got, there was a backlash. You know, they were saying, we don't want to hear about you. And there was a lot of intimidation. It was not welcome. When it was small, Corinne and I feel that we were supported. I don't know that we would have stuck around if we had experience with the younger, the women who followed us. I don't think so. So when we, so they would then retreat or they would leave. So through that, at the time, there were other organizations like La Raza newspaper, there was Regeneración, there was the Mexican, the leadership program. I think that really played a major role in opening my eyes, because even though I was came from a very overt, segregated town where I knew all about racism, I never expected it to change. And I never expected anything from those people. And you were happier if you didn't expect anything from them, you know. So here I learned that when I got involved in the student movement, that we could make a change, and we could organize it, we could make a difference. And so that's what I learned, and in time, as I saw that the Chicano Press Association made the difference. That's what connected us all. In LA, because LA is so big, throughout the state colleges, throughout the state, throughout the Southwest, it was the Chicano Press. And so to me, that was the model that I felt would be helpful in helping one, advocating for Chicana, I didn't know at the time, but civil rights, having Chicana thought, whatever it is, because it was never one thought. It was multiple ideas, because the women came from multiple parts of life. They were artists, they were musicians, they were poets, they were many things. And so I felt that we needed a medium for people to hear that. And then I also felt I was a part of establishing Chicano studies at CalState Long Beach, but there was no Chicana classes, nothing. There were no books on Chicana. And then the real big book there in Chicano studies, those first couple of years. I don't know if it is now, but I'll give you my opinion about it. Opio Paz's Labyrinth and Solitude, you know, here we were praising that racist book. I said, this guy looks down at us and we're praising him? You know, forget the woman thing, just Chicanos, you know, he just had put us in a little hole. He had just, he spoke down to us. He was like, you know, we didn't need anybody else, and I didn't understand why this guy was supposed to be so hot and why we all had to read him. And then what he said about the woman and the Malinche syndrome and all that kind of stuff, oh, that just started something that was, I said, that's just a bunch of lies, that's more racism, and nobody believed, there was a difference of opinion. And so, Corinne and I, we started a newspaper. First it was Hermanas, Las Hermanas, for just the students. And then we started a newspaper to talk about what's going on, what are Chicanos doing in LA. And that was Hijas de Cuauhtémoc. And I could go on and on and on. But eventually, really what I felt the need was to keep, I saw Regeneración, Francisca Flores. She always had a woman's issue. And she tried to have at least 4 women's issues a year. And that was like those women's names. And they had been involved in the 60s and the 50s, and that was so important to help reinforce what we were doing and help us understand that this wasn't a new thing, that just we had to keep on voicing it. And so I felt that it was through media and getting people to write down their thoughts, women to write down their thoughts and have them heard. That was my role.
Last question for you, Ana. So what do you think is the legacy of the Chicano movement?
Well, I think that well, you have Chicano studies. That's good, but Chicano studies, I don't think, it has a long ways to go, because one of the things is that the research and the diversity of information is still small. And until recently, I'd say maybe in 2000, there has been more publications. So one of the things about Chicano student movement is, you know, what happened, who are we? But there's still a lot of things, like for instance, like the CSO, we don't have a written thing about the history of the CSO, who they were, what happened, are they alive, what role did that play for the next generation? So Chicano studies, I think, is a lot of civil rights legislation was supported by the Chicano student movement, the Chicano community movement. Our communication with other communities, we weren't so isolated, because at that time, all the other communities, the Asian community, the Black student movement, they were emphasizing what we do in the community, and so that opened up doors so that if you came from a segregated or isolated community, that opened doors, and you were able to build alliances. Just coming to campus and seeing Chicano students, that is a legacy. And like, I see them at the buses that come from the high schools and the elementary schools. Every year they come to the campus and, you know, set kind of a path. This is where you can come. That's a wonderful, because when we came in '68, there was no such thing as, you would have been maybe a group of 20 people, you know, and you're just a group of interested people. You don't really represent how many Hispanic or Chicano or Latino people are here on campus pursuing their education. So I'd say that's a major one.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our next panelist is Soledad Chole Alatorre. She was born in San Luis Potosí in Mexico. She organized workers since the 1950s. She was a union steward and contract negotiator, and she also led strikes that led to better working conditions. And she too was the co-founder of GASA along with Bert Corona.
Buenas tardes o good evening. Okay. Siempre estuve tan ocupada. I was so busy. First, looking what happened in the United States. Everything was new for me when I arrived here. But the first thing I noticed, the racism. That's what I was looking for. I said, how this can happen? And then I started working. And I work hard. And I get tired, especially the first hours in the morning. I said, how they can push the people to work that way? Mexico is not that way. The people has to try to relax a little bit, you know. Even go to the toilet easy and take a little time in there and the way they relax. But not in here. You have to do. The work has to go. And the way I started looking at what happened. The first discussion I had in my first job was with two ladies. We have the break. We went to the break. And then I was going to have coffee, and I meet two ladies that come across me. And one of the ladies, unlocked lady, told to the other something, and squeezing something. She did. And then both left. And one of them, they said, are you from Mexico? I said, yes, I am. So proud to be. She told me, I told you, she's a communist. Oh, God. I feel like she pushed me down because in the beginning I believed they was trying to be friends. But when she said that to others, I get mad. I feel offended, not because communists or whatever, you know, but I feel mad in the way she left and she made me, and she said that question. So I said, yes, I have communists on what? Is not this a free country? Oh, don't get mad, don't get mad. Don't get mad, you made me mad. I don't want to talk to you. That was my first fight. And from there to until now, I'm still doing something better. I feel proud of all these things these ladies was doing and tell us the history. It's not a lie. We are not reading what happened. We don't need it. We have it here. Memories that we live and we work for. I went to work from my first place I worked in to some other place where the condition was work, bad. I started, wow, what happened? What we can do to change a little bit these things. You don't understand me what I say because my English is worse. Let me know, and then somebody can translate for me. So I went to some other job. Bad. The conditions was terrible. And then they don't pay holidays. That people never get a day for relax. Nothing. They never give a raise to nobody. But nobody say anything. The majority of the people has no papers. Very few. I remember it clear. It was 5 black ladies working in there and 2 Anglo girls. The rest was Spanish people. what we can do, what we can do. But in Mexico we say, en la casa de los tuertos, en la casa de los ciegos, el tuerto es rey. I was that tuerto. I talk a little bit of English, the English that I learned all over. Well, so then, I saw the complaints of the people. You know, my check was short. They took out me about $3. No, they took me a $5 and I missed it. And why you don't go into the office and complain? Tell them that you need money. No, okay, I work all day and that day is not in my paycheck. Oh God, that's too much. So then I started moving. No, go to the office and ask for your money. And let's go to see if they're gonna have a holiday for us, y nos van a dar un holiday. Well, pretty soon, they give me a better position. You know, we can put this lady in some place else. We'll work around. Okay. So I take better position, but the problems don't stop. But I usually eat with my co-workers. Yes, women. Todas las mujeres estábamos allí. And they started complaining when we were sitting. I say, well, why are you complaining? And don't go all together and tell the boss what happened. No, they fired us. Every time that we opened our mouth, they fired us. No puede ser posible, porque no organizan la unión. Oh, una de las negritas, una black lady say, all you wanted is the boss fire us. You're going to the news with the boss, we want the union. And that's what we're going to do. I said, no, I don't want that. I don't want to hear the people complaining and don't fight. You can do something for better of everybody. So I said, okay. So finally, 3 days later, one of the girls went and said, they call me Sol. They don't call me Soledad or Chole. They call me Sol. So, do you really tell us that it's better for us to get into the union? I said, pues try. La peor lucha es la que no se hace. But for that time, I was supervisor, okay? So the boss has the news right away. Someone tell them the people try to get into the union. So, normally, I say they commit a mistake with me because they don't fire me. But they put me down. I was no more supervisor. I went to work in a table where we have to put the gauges and screws and things like that. So I said, oh, wonderful. Now I can help these people. I'm not working. So by that time, some of the black ladies went to see the union, and the organizers come into the factory. So they started rolling the cars all over. So I said, well, okay, they will have a meeting the next day. No, I said, well, for the next day, I be with you guys in the meeting. Oh, good. And one of them, they said, no, Chole, they want to fire you. Okay, that's okay. I don't worry too much for this job. Yeah. The day I went to the union hall with the workers, everybody was behind me. So, sucedió lo que tenía que suceder. They fired me until then. So the next day, well, no, that day when they fired me close to 4 o'clock, the time to go out. And the way the people don't get mad. But the same day, I say, okay, they fire me, I am not working tomorrow, you're not going to see me, and bye-bye, girls, good luck. And I went home, but everybody went to my house. The neighbors was scaring what happened, and you know, so we called the union, and the union came in, and then we started making a letter. I was the, ¿cómo se dice? Chivo expiatorio. Bueno, ajá. Entonces, me corrieron y al otro día yo estaba enfrente de la planta con una carta dándosela a todas las compañeras y no las dejaba entrar hasta que gritaran 5 veces ¡Viva la Unión! Entonces dejaba el volante y se los daba, entonces gritaban, se entraban a la fábrica mientras todos los jefes estaban por la ventana mirando qué pasaba. Y ya así conocí otras personas de la Unión y un señor de la Unión me presentó al señor Corona, Corona, ahí fue donde lo conocí. Y a la semana fuimos a cenar y ellos quedaron de acordar de que iban a estar pendientes de las gentes y que yo iba a seguir ayudando a los trabajadores y todo. Pero yo teniendo vacaciones dije me voy a México, pues ustedes van. Y I went to Mexico. ¿Me entendieron lo que dije en español? ¿Todos? ¿Todos? Ah, entonces sigo en español, ¿qué les parece? Bueno, entonces me fui a México, pero cuando volví encontré que el señor Corona y otro joven que trabajaba, que era de Mapa, ¿se acuerdan de él? Tapia, medio bronco, ¿verdad? Pero me estaban esperando que llegara porque la compañía llamó a la migración y se llevó 40 de mis compañeras. Yo le tiene que venir porque las tienen encarceladas y ¿qué vamos a hacer? Pues el abogado de la Unión, hay que rescatarlas. A ver cómo se hace para poner una fianza. Fuimos a ver un fianzador, le hablamos de la gente y toda la cosa y salieron. Unas eran de Argentina, que las trataron muy mal, pusieron un juicio y hasta la fecha no se resuelve. Pero salieron todas y siguieron organizando la Unión. El día que yo entré, por supuesto, siguió un pleito, porque cuando me corrieron yo ya no era empleada de confianza, no era mayordoma ni nada, ya me habían puesto como trabajadora general. Entonces pusimos un caso que me corrieron por actividades de unión, porque fui a la corte y todo. Entonces el Departamento de Trabajo decidió que yo tenía que ir a votar, porque no se había solucionado mi asunto. Y llegué a votar contra toda la fuerza de los abogados que pusieron para que yo no entrara a votar en la compañía. Pero con la condición de que yo no hablara con ninguna de mis compañeras, con ninguna. No podía hablar y entrar a la hora de la votación, iba a entrar a votar, pero iban a ir 2 oficiales conmigo, cuidando de que yo no hablara o pusiera en la mente de las trabajadoras o fuera a hablar a decirles algo de la Unión. Me entré con ellos 2, pero todo el mundo volteó a verme cuando entraba y yo muy contenta porque íbamos a ganar con toda seguridad. Entré con mis 2 guardaespaldas, saludándolas como reina del país. Y solo perdimos 2 votos, ganamos por mayoría. So, así fue como empecé yo. Después fuimos a cenar con el señor Corona y los señores de la Unión y el comité de organizar de la planta, ¿verdad? Para prepararlos, quién iba a ser steward y cómo venía el contrato. No sabía nada, nadie, ni yo. Y fuimos a cenar y ahí oí que el señor Corona no podía ir al siguiente día a nuestra junta porque tenía un caso, no sé qué, pero porque tenía que ir a defender unos señores a la corte o interpretarlos, porque entonces sí se permitía que cualquier gente fuera a interpretarlos. Bueno, pues dije yo, este es el tal señor Corona que yo he visto por la televisión, porque ya estaba saliendo en la televisión defendiendo, estaban organizando en ese entonces MAPA. Y bueno, total que dije al otro día, no va a ir, ¿verdad? Pero al cabo no va a ser a la hora que tiene la corte. Yo voy a ir a ver qué pasa. Y me fui a espiar y me senté, entré a la corte asustada, porque nunca había estado en una corte. Me metí atrás y me senté en un rincón porque estaba oscurona la corte, mero atrás en un rincón. Y nada, no pasaba nada, ni el señor Corona venía. Vino el sheriff con un montón de prisioneros, los sentaron así en un lado de la corte, ¿verdad? A esperar su juicio. Y yo allí en mi rincón, esperando a ver si veía al señor Corona. Muy de repente, los prisioneros que estaban ahí empezaron a moverse. Y volteo y voy viendo al señor Corona con un portafolio debajo del brazo mío. Llegando así, y hizo así. Y los prisioneros luego hicieron así. Entonces yo dije, y luego el sergeant sheriff que está ahí los aplacó, ya se quedaron todos silencios. Sí, al rato ya atendió el juez unos cuantos y luego los que el señor Corona iba a defender. Ya estuvo con ellos y todo, ya los salvó, no sé cómo, pero ahí estaba, yo no entendía nada. Hagan de cuenta que estaba en una película viendo una corte, ¿verdad? Y entonces se salió y yo salí detrás de él. Señor Corona, ¿y en qué puedo ayudarle? Y me dice, ahora que estoy desocupada, ¿verdad? Y dice, bueno, mañana van a la corte sus compañeras, váyase al departamento de migración, a la calle Los Ángeles, en el 8º piso, váyase y ahí le esperamos. Ahí va a estar él con nosotros ayudándonos. Váyase y ahí le esperamos y ahí les va a dar mucho gusto a sus compañeras verla que van porque son las que estaban prisioneras y todo. Pues ahí les voy. Y al otro día que voy a llegar, pues eran como 9 las que estaban ahí. Entonces les va a tocar corte, pero era nomás, es una de las suyas, vaya con ella. Bueno, ¿y yo qué voy a hacer? ¿Saben lo que me dijo ese señor? Defiéndala. Durísimo, ¿qué es eso? Pero ahí entré yo. ¿Cómo? Yo no sé. La defendí. Me le dieron un permiso indefinido para estar en mi país. ¿Cómo? Dicen que la ignorancia es atrevida, ¿verdad? Pues así era yo. Y así salimos una por una hasta que se quedaron todas aquí. Vinieron a acabar de arreglar sus papeles, fíjense todo lo que les duraron en estas y cartas y que esperen que les contesten y que les contestaban, no les contestaban, así hasta que vino la amnistía. Bueno, eso fue, en esos días decidimos formar una organización que se llamó. Ahí ahí fue lo bueno. Ahí empezamos a trabajar para luchar, como dijo el señor Corona, por los más vulnerables. Si los más vulnerables no se levantan, nosotros nunca vamos a valer. Tenía razón. Bueno, empezamos a luchar con llenarle los papeles a la gente que no los tenía. Y en eso estaba la guerra de Vietnam, ustedes saben. Y que se vienen las cosas, ¿y qué pasa? Que un muchacho va a romper su tarjeta de drive, ustedes saben, y no van a ir a la guerra y van a hacer protesta, y que este muchacho era nada menos que Rosalío Muñoz. Pues ahí vamos. Nunca se me va a olvidar, porque le presté mi carro a ver para que estuviera pronto porque iba tarde, y le dieron un ticket para donde le pasara. Y así seguimos trabajando. Fuimos a la marcha. Me ha tocado ver el trabajo de todas estas ladies, que a veces ni nos vemos en años, ya hasta ni nos conocemos. Pasamos una junto de la otra y pues quién será, pues quién sabe. Pero así pasa en la vida. Pero todas estuvimos luchando muy arduamente. Yo puedo decir que yo vi cómo nació Pumas, Mecha, cómo veía al señor Corona con los muchachos sentados, Mecha, Mexican, que así le ponen, otra letra para que saliera bien, ¿verdad? Y todas esas cosas hasta que se formaba el nombre y todo. Me dio importancia también cuando organizaron las clases en las universidades. El recuerdo de la tragedia de allá del Valle de San Fernando, de Norwich, la universidad de allá, cuando les quemaron la casa a los muchachos de estudios chicanos. No les dieron una oficina, pero les dieron una casa vieja. La pusieron muy bonita, hicieron su oficina y quedó todo muy bien, muy bonito. Señores, cuando tenían ya su oficina chicana, se las quemaron, muchos a la cárcel. Y muchas tragedias que pasaban y que teníamos que estar allí. Sin embargo, se hizo el moratorio. ¿Qué pasó allí? También, cuánta cosa, cuánta hostilidad. Estábamos, todos pusimos nuestras casas, ¿se acuerdan? Para que viniera gente de fuera y pudieran tener alojamiento. Teníamos nosotros la oficina de casa, era pues, tan grande como el salón o más grande. Se llenó de gente allí con cobijas y como podíamos, colchas y almohadas que facilitaron todos los vecinos. Era para que durmieran los que vinieron de Chicago, de Indiana, de Nueva York, de donde quiera vino gente con todos nosotros, con el movimiento chicano, que ya se hizo grande el movimiento chicano, y fuimos a la marcha en contra de la guerra de Vietnam, donde murió Rubén Salazar. Así es que nosotros, no crean, sí somos muy mujeres y muy valientes, pero sí queremos a los hombres porque los ayudamos mucho, ¿verdad? Y nos sentimos orgullosas de lo que fueron. Yo no sé si ustedes han visto una película que se tomó el día del Moratorium, donde ustedes saben, en montones grandes, y todos los hombres se juntaron con sus brazos cogidos así, unos con otros en cadena, para tapar el cúmulo de policías que venían a golpear a la gente. Y así los respaldaron varias veces. Esa es la historia nuestra. Y tenemos tanto que cada uno de nosotros podía escribir una historia. Podemos escribir una Biblia de la historia de los mexicanos en este país, unidos con todos los que han venido de todas partes. Muy cierto que la discriminación ha sido más grande con los mexicanos. Abiertamente es lo que pasa, dicen, el temor al peligro es el que mata, y por eso nos tienen así. Hemos sido víctimas de todos los nombres. Primero comunistas, después terroristas, chicanías, chicanos, quiere decir ladrones, y quién sé qué, tanto que decían. No era cierto. Pues yo digo una cosa, le doy mucho crédito a los maestros, a todos los maestros que estuvieron en esos años del movimiento, donde estaban, ¿se acuerdan? Pues todos, junto con Raúl Ruiz y Ruria Acuña, tantos maestros, tantos muchachos, tantos estudiantes aquí y allá. ¿Cómo se ha fundado? ¿Cómo se fundó la escuela de leyes de Law School, donde estuvo Patricio Vargas trabajando, y que han salido bastantes estudiantes de allí, y los mejores abogados, especialmente en efectos de migración y ayudar en cosas de la causa, han salido de nuestro movimiento. Tenemos que sentirnos orgullosos de lo que hemos hecho, aparte de que hemos tenido genios fantásticos que han sido parte de todo el mundo. Y claro, nunca nos sentimos que somos como, ¿qué les diré?, como unas competidoras del hombre, no, sino como ¿cómo les diré?, una fuerza implacable. Una vez que miramos la lucha, que debe ser en bien para todos, no importa, hasta los niños están al frente. Yo estoy orgullosa de nuestro pueblo y muy orgullosa, aunque en cuestiones de ciencias nunca nos toman en cuenta, ¿verdad? Y luego lo tratan de bajar. Por ejemplo, les digo yo, cuando tengo una plática con jóvenes, les digo, siéntanse orgullosos. Miren, el que hizo el foco, la luz y tantas cosas que de ahí se originaron, fue Alva Edison. Todavía existe la plaquita allí en Guanajuato, allá donde están las fresas, ¿verdad? En la donde nació Tomás Alva Edison. Nunca le han dado mucho crédito, le dan crédito, ¿verdad? Nunca dicen que también tenía parte mexicana o lo que sea. El muchacho que descubrió la cosa de los el carrito de Juan, no sé si jaló o no la foto, pero tantas cosas que tienen que contribuir a nuestro pueblo, y grandes vemos y somos un pueblo que camina hacia el triunfo. Y hoy están unidos. Voy a decir, no quiero alargar mucho, y yo sé que todos descansan, no las acabaré de contar. Sí, que si está en una conferencia, se va a decir muy importante todos ustedes. Las universidades, enseñaba cálculos mentales. Cálculos mentales. Se las platicaba. Y así aprendió nuestra gente. Y yo les voy a decir, todavía hay personas que viven en el valle, que fueron discípulas de ellas, y ellas son unas computadoras. Denles cualquier cuenta y se las dan mentalmente. Por eso yo estoy muy contenta, además de que triunfantes también, porque celebramos por las 8 horas de trabajo. El mundo entero lo celebra, y la que acabó el trabajo de 5 hombres que ahorcaron fue Lucy González, mexicana. No debemos de quedarnos callados, seguir la lucha. Como dicen, el último en reír, ríe mejor. A seguir adelante y muchas gracias.
Before opening up for discussion, I do want to acknowledge and recognize that yes, there's a great majority of women activists in this audience who were involved in one way or another in the Chicano movement. And I also want to, I want everyone around you to know who you are. So I want to ask all of you who in one way or another were involved in the Chicano movement to please rise. And let's give them a round of applause, please. Just, throwing in the names in there. So anyway, hopefully this type of event sets the tone for other such types of events. And now we want to open it up for discussion. So just raise your hand if you have a question, and then specify whether the question is for one person or anyone. Yeah.
I wanted to ask Gloria if she could, can you hear me?
Gloria?
Yeah, Gloria, I was wondering if you could talk about, because one of the things that I remember about the Clinica was that there were a lot of articles in Regeneración and some of the newspapers, La Raza newspaper, about the health issues of the Chicana. And those things never, that was like I'd say, what do you call it, cornerstone. I was wondering if you could say some of those things that you guys did.
Some of the issues that we were very real involved in was going to the high schools because venereal disease was out of control. And there was no education about that. There was no talk of protection and what to do to prevent those things. And then there's a stigma attached to it. And so we were able to get the health department once again to bring all their equipment to our clinic. We did our testing in complete confidentiality and then take it to the health department, and people would get results that way, and that kind of cut the stigma. Another issue that I found was abortion counseling. Okay, when we first started the clinic, the Catholic Church was funding us. When they came to discuss with us the issue of abortion, they withdrew their funds. And my stand was, if you were to survey your parishioners, you would find a lot of them practice birth control. And that's all we were asking, was to give counseling. We weren't doing abortions, we weren't promoting it, we were just giving counseling, because there was other alternatives to pregnancy or unwanted pregnancy. Another issue was immunization for children. People just weren't doing that, and children. We used to get a van, once again funded by the county. They gave us a van, they gave us a doctor, they gave us all their medical, their professional medicals and nurses. We went to the housing projects. We knocked on the door and we said, hey, we're giving immunizations right now, no cost, come on down. And we reached a lot of people like that. Let me think of some of the other issues. Sterilization, I think I was sharing with somebody earlier, my own auntie, she was put in a juvenile facility and she was sterilized, and nobody went to her parents, my grandma, and said, we're gonna do this. And I never knew until after she passed. Her sister told me, why she didn't have children. And it was because she was sterilized at a very young age as a teenager. So,
In the 30s.
yes. And this, they didn't ask for anybody's authorization. They just did it.
Why did they that in the 70s for sterilization at College Hospital? Women in throes of labor were not allowed to give birth until they signed consent forms, sometimes in English and they were monolingual in Spanish. So it was horrible abuse.
Women were in pain and they weren't given pain medicine until they signed that.
I think particularly if they were on welfare.
Yes. Yes.
I think that's something that hasn't really been written down. Because in essence, that is just.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, Dion?
Well, actually, I thought Dr. Virginia Espino was here, but maybe she left. Well, there she actually did a dissertation on this, and I don't know if she wants to say a little bit. She gave a talk on our campus recently on this issue, and I think she's probably interviewed several people here.
Yeah, I interviewed you on the Grandmother Gloria way back in 1992 for my dissertation, and basically what I write about is the sterilization abuse that occurred at the LA County Hospital in the 1970s, and I'm looking specifically at the Madrigal utility case, where 12 women started the case, and it ended up being only 9 women. And I spoke with Antonio Hernandez, who was a lawyer in the case, and Gloria Molina, who was an activist with Comisión Penal, who became a plaintiff in the case, along with the women. And I spoke with you, and I talked to Alicia Escalante about your experiences with witnessing and hearing women talk about how they had been sterilized right after they delivered their child. So they went to the hospital to deliver their baby. Many of them, it was emergency delivery, and were approached at their bedside to sign these consent forms. And this was the 1970s, so it was a very different kind of sterilization than what your aunt experienced, because that was a different kind of program. But still, with government funds, with government approval, those things were happening, and that's what I write.
As part of that survey, not all the women knew they were sterilized.
Right.
Not all the women knew they were sterilized. And so, as part of, when they found out who were all the people sterilized, then there was a group of students that went to interview these women. And they were in a real conundrum, because once they were told that they had been sterilized, and then things began to click. Well, that's why I haven't had any children. But they didn't want their husbands to be told, because they thought if their husbands knew that they could no longer conceive and that they were sterilized, that they would abandon them, and then their whole life would go down the drain. So that was a real dilemma that civil rights students group had in terms of going and informing the women what in fact had happened to them.
Any other questions in the audience? Okay, you go there.
Hello. I'd like to thank everyone who organized this, first of all. And my question is to Ms. Gloria, if she could talk a little bit about what led you to found Adelitas. What led you to lead the Adelitas organization?
It's actually,
Actually, it was a time when there was some discontentment in the Brown Ray organization, and I was having, discussions, quote unquote, with leaders, our leader, and I threatened, if things don't straighten up, I will leave. I will take all the women and some of the men, and that's exactly what happened. And being that we're community people now, we didn't just want to go back into the background and do nothing again and stay active. We decided to start this organization, and Alicia Escalante was part of this. And I don't remember a long term of that organization, But, you know, one of the things I have to say that what was the legacy of Chicano women, I think for, you know, speaking for me personally, and I can say it for all of these ladies here also, that it was the development of the Chicana's identity. You know, we didn't realize it, maybe I didn't realize it at the time, but in retrospect I can say, yes.
Okay, Rosalio had a question?
Well, I'm just wondering if some of the people could speak more from the panel and others about the women of the Mexican American movement and how that became the women of the Chicano. I think Irene, who couldn't scale, she's got a month and a half since her operation, and was hoping to be able to be here at the bar. Was very much involved on that. And I know Carol Dean was also very involved in so many, Lupe and so many others here. Could talk a little bit about that. How did the movement, let's say of the 60s, that started those leadership contests with the men and the women? What was that, and how did that become a Chicano?
One day, your turn. We were Mexican American.
So Michael, you're okay.
I'll give you some vitamins.
You know, one of the things that happened in East LA.
What's your name?
This is Lupe Anguiano. One day we were having a lot of problems with the education issue, and then one day we just decided to start the Mexican American Women's Council. And with that Mexican American Women's Council, we actually organized the men also. The purpose was to elect a representative for the school board. And that's when...
Stand up, please. So the camera could see you.
Oh.
That was a request. For the people online who want to see you all over the country.
Well, anyway, the purpose of that organization was really to elect a Chicano to the school board. And anyone, I think many of you will remember, I know you do, some of you remember, that we were having, one of the big problems we had in California is that they were labeling our students mentally retarded. As a matter of fact, there was a law that was passed to fund mentally retarded programs, and that program was focused really on the Latino child. And one of the things that teachers would tell me was that the student, the Chicano student, could not communicate. That his problem was communication. And so that was really, and then at UCLA, pardon me, my friend from UCLA, there was a study done by UCLA for her doctorate that said that the raising habits of Mexican American women resulted in mental retardation. I wish that I had a copy of that, because Delina Hernandez and UCLA, and that really was the thing that caught fire and really forced us to really do a lot of things. But it was the Mexican American Women's Council that really started the campaign to elect Nava.
Julian.
And then he turned out to be not as good
Do any of the panelists want to answer sorry questions or Germany?
He's not here, but you just said that on television.
Who are you?
Well, it's the truth.
Okay, who are you? Introduce yourself.
He didn't do as much as we wanted you to do.
Say your name. Your name.
My name is Jerry.
It's not on here.
Okay, you have to go like this.
It's on.
Look,
Like this?
yeah.
Yeah.
My name is Jerry. I don't know what name to use because I have so many, but really, and one of the names has something to do with my own identity. And you asked me to, respond on the question, being Mexican American, or when did change come as far as suddenly, I say suddenly, I can't remember when the change came, but it had to be one day I was doing this, and then the next day I was doing that. For me, it's, and I think for a lot of people in this audience, who I hope you think about what I'm saying and do something about it, because the Native American part, of who we are, I think has to be, in order to be truly, spiritually touched with who we are. Most of the people in this room, as well as myself, are Native American. From wherever your parents were from, wherever your grandparents were from. I always ask people, well, where in Mexico? And then I try to get them to think about being the indigenous people. And I can say it easy because my mother was from the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. And her name was Standing Bear, my grandfather's name, Standing Bear. And who was asking me today? Somebody was asking me what my name was, and I said, from now on, I'm going to say my name is Geraldine Standing Bear Campos Ledesma Zapata. No. But I think that the name, the name is important because it signifies something. And what, to me, what being a Chicana signified was an open statement about what I believe in and what I can do. In other words, I am an activist. If you're a Chicana or a Chicano, you're most likely an activist. And so I think that was connected. And so I was an activist even before I was Mexican American. So I could say that that really is a matter of identity and what we believe in and what action do we want to take on behalf of our people, on our community. So I don't know.
Thank you. Right now, I'm sorry, we're gonna have to, I just need to ask the panelists if you wanna respond to that question that Rosalio posed? Yeah? Okay. Gloria, yeah.
I have seen like an evolution go with waves. It's Mexicans, Americans of Mexican descent, then it went to Mexican American, and there's a lot went to Chicano, and there was a lot of people that didn't like that name. They found it derogatory, and there was always, fights over that. And now I see it going towards, I've heard Hispanic for a while, then Latino. Now I'm hearing the word indigenous. Okay, and that goes back to what you said. I feel very blessed that I was called back to my indigenous roots, which is a Tongva person, which is the original people of the LA Basin. And I kind of had a conflict being pulled back into the Chicano thing, but I have to realize that's history. That's my history, or her story. Her story, as they say. And it's part of me, and it needs to be told. But yet I follow everything in the native way. My spirituality, my ceremonies, I've gone back to my original language. And people of this First Nation, as they say. I think it's revolutionary. Like this, who knows where it's going? But we still know who we are, right? We all know our personal history and culture and our roots.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Anna?
I wanted to talk about something different, and that is one of the critical things that Lupe and Jerry, Connie Munoz, Lily, for me personally, Francisca, is that this whole thing about identity was very important to me, because when I went to, I knew who I was. In San Bernardino, we called ourselves Chicanos. I don't know why, and I don't care why. That's just what we called ourselves, and so it wasn't a new word to me. But when I came here to CalState Long Beach and came to LA, where the Chicanos called themselves Mexicans or Mexicanos or whatever, you know, we always called ourselves some name. And whatever we call ourselves, if we own it, we identify it, I think that's who you are. That's who we are. That gives you a place in the sun. But as far as women's identity, Chicana's identity, is that if it wasn't for my mom or the women in my family, I would not have known, I would not have done what I did. I would have not known how to do it, or to feel comfortable in how to do it, because it was very hard. It's very hard to fight in the civil rights movement, where civil rights is seen as something that is that the women need to wait for. It's very hard to work in a civil rights organization where there is domestic violence, where there is predatory behavior, where there is abuse of children, and for you to say stop in the name of love and civil rights, you know, and then to be harassed, to lose your job, to be discriminated against, to be threatened. Even my son was threatened. He was 4 years old. It was hell, and it is hell. But if it wasn't for women and men from who had gone through that already, and who would be there for me, just to see in my mind. I don't think I've ever thanked you, but in my mind, in my darkest hours, you were there, and it helped me go on. And I think that's what we can be for the women who proceed after us, is that in your brightest moments, but also in your darkest moments, where you have self-doubt, and then we're there, and we are your strength. And that's was there for me. Luckily, you know, I got to know these women, and they were there in times of great confusion, and you didn't feel alone. And you weren't unique. I wasn't unique, thank you. I mean, there's time to be unique, and there's time not to be unique. So identity is very important. When we were in the started the movement, there was this woman. She was powerful. She was a speaker. She could speak very clearly. I used to stutter, and I haven't studied this, but she was my hero. I needed a hero, just like everybody. I needed a hero, and she was my hero. She was in college, and she was doing a good student. I was a very poor student. She was a good reader. I was a lousy reader. Everything. So to her, and then we vote her to be the first UMA's president. And she says, no, I think it should be a man, and so I think it should be so-and-so. And I go, ay, mama. What does it matter? What does it matter? It's the most, you know, it's the person who can do the job at that time. But I realized that every time I looked at a movie, I always hoped that I always prayed Charles Bronson was a Chicano. I just praised he would. And at the same time, I just praised to see Chicano leaders because it formed a pathway for me. It was like, yeah, that path has been walked before. This is not a path that is forbidden for me. And so, and same for the men, because through Chicana, the Hijas de Cuauhtemoc, it was the fathers of the students at CalState Northridge that raised the money for our newspaper because they knew that this would be something that would help their daughters. The guys in the organization didn't, but these fathers did. And so it's so that identity is very important. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Charlie?
About what you say, un día chicanas y otro día mexicanas o México-americanas y todo. Otra vez, el señor Corona, yo tengo mucho, pues, trabajé tanto con él, que llegó, tenía sus clases en la universidad y había seguido esa pregunta. ¿Qué somos chicanos? No, chicanos se ve muy feo. ¿Qué somos mexicanos? Pues sí, pero estamos acá y que los mexicanos allá nos miran acá, que México-americanos y luego México-americanos ni nos quieren, pues ¿qué somos? Y dice el señor Corona a la chiflada, dice, chicanos, somos chicanos. Y miren, los judíos les llamaron marranos y ese fue su triunfo, se siguieron llamando marranos y ganaron. Chicanos, somos chicanos y que se queden con el nombre que nos va a identificar. Y mira, pregúntenle a los muchachos, a Raúl Luis, también a Rosalío, a todos los muchachos, que afírmense. Si son chicanos, son chicanos. Si son mexicanos, son mexicanos, lo que sea. Pero que afirmen el nombre de lo que se sientan proud. Okay. Y además, en un libro de la independencia de allá de quién sabe cuántos años hace o de la conquista, está la historia del famoso general Cortines, que les dice a sus soldados, y está en la historia ya en los museos, ¿verdad? Que les dice a sus soldados, levántense mis chicanos, porque ahí vienen los gringos.
Thank you. Okay, I just heard that we also have some questions that are being submitted online, so let's take one of the questions submitted online.
Well, first of all, everybody's very excited. They're glad that they can watch across the U.S. and Mexico watch this. They're already saying, soy chicana. Chicano, okay. But one of the questions for Anna was, why is it that you saw it as important to foreground a concrete consideration of 16th century colonialism in your work beyond just a passing reference as most at the time would do at all? Say focus on 1840.
Can you say that again?
Totally asked this. Why is it that you saw it as important to foreground a concrete consideration of 16th century colonialism in your work, beyond just a passing reference as most of the time many would do?
Well, what they're talking about is, I think what she's talking about is, I wrote this article, if that's what she's talking about, called La Hembra. And I felt that I could see a lot of the things that were said to me, or the obstacles that we confronted, the cultural obstacles that we confronted, were ideas and values that sounded like they were coming from my great-great-grandma, okay? And so I saw those were the cultural barriers that she had to go through, and I was wondering, why are those cultural barriers still here? And I started to research machismo. That's where it came from. And because what's wrong with the macho? The macho's a good guy, it's not a bad thing, it's pride, it's this and that. And it was, so I wanted to look at, well, where does that
those cultural values come from. So I looked at La Hembra, I looked at where it's, that concept is the institutionalization of La Hembra and the macho. And it gave me something more concrete to be able to discuss the topic. That's why, because it's that old. It's not like we're in the 21st century. We're still representing concepts of feudalism and colonialism, and we're owning that and taking pride in it. And I was just wanted people to look at it and say, you know, why is this, why do we want to hold on to it? And I wanted to give a historical perspective of it. I hope that answers.
Okay, let's just take one more from there, and then we'll go
They're
here,
not
and then
all that hard.
we'll go back and forth.
Okay, but the next one is interesting. It was directed specifically to Gloria, but anybody can answer this. They were said, let's see, La Fiera says this: I'm wondering how similar or different is our time period in light of Arizona's SB 1070, different from the time you began your work with berets.
I see it as a very different time. I don't recall immigration per se being an issue back 40 years ago, although it was an issue, but it wasn't something that we socially organized towards. Now, you know, I see it as a very big organizing issue and a very emotional issue, because when you see families being split, if they're taking a parent and maybe kids, you know, behind, and they're saying we can't service your child in a hospital or a clinic, you know, something's wrong with that. You know, we're losing, you know, the government or the powers that be are you know, not being sensitive to human need. Okay, they want to separate us. It's a racist issue. It's you know, I always think, well, immigration. Okay, so if I'm blonde, blue-eyed, that means I could never be an immigrant. Okay, well, gee whiz, I think all the native tribes say, well, there sure was a lot of immigrants that came once upon a time, and I wish we would have had an immigration law at that time. Okay? So, you know, just because you're brown doesn't mean you're an immigrant, or that, you know, my grandfather came from Chihuahua. Okay, so I cannot deny that part of me. That is my history. Okay? And a lot of people are not, you know, here. I'm 14th generation on my native side, but, you know, 3rd generation on my father's Mexican side. There's so many issues with it, but it's just, the way it's being done is inhumane. Okay, just to say, I can stop you because my son lives in Arizona, so we're always afraid, you know, and I'm being facetious about that, but his brother's laughing over there. I just see it as different. It's a huge issue. I think it's going to get more large in terms of how other states respond, trying to follow Arizona's, what they've done. And I just think this is the issue to organize on now.
Okay, now two more questions from the audience. You first and then second.
Hi, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about the history of welfare rights organizing in East LA. What were conditions like for Chicanas as they went to apply for aid in the offices? What kinds of attitudes did they encounter from the caseworkers? And then who organized? How did that come about?
I can talk a little bit about it. I know Alicia Escalante was head of welfare rights organization, and you know, was a very she was very passionate about what she believed in, and she spoke out on it constantly. And there was a time when, if you applied for welfare, they would look under the beds to see if there was men's shoes there. Okay, the questions they asked were very, very prying. You know, how many times they've had sex and, things that, they wouldn't do now. But, and I'm speaking from my own experience, okay, because I did apply for welfare. I had 2 sons. It was very tough. I was going to school, and I had to go through this. And what I did was tell them, I'm Native American, so, your laws don't pertain to me. And they didn't know how, they bought huge law books out. And they said, what, did you have a ceremony? I said, no. I did get married. But this is what women had to go through. I was, excuse my language, smart ass. Other women weren't, and they were, treated so badly, and the questions they asked were just horrible. So, and they pursued you thinking you were, doing everything wrong against the law rather than trying to get the aid that you needed to survive. So, that's what I can say. The Welfare Rights Organization, they did a lot of good work, and they fought constantly.
Alicia Escalante, I'm going to talk a little bit about Alicia Escalante, okay? I worked in welfare rights, but I was more on the periphery. But they formed, prior to the Chicano Welfare Rights Organization, there was just welfare rights. And Alicia was joined the Welfare Rights Organization with what's the leader's name? Johnny Tillman. And she's a leader in the welfare rights organizing back in the 60s. And Alicia felt that that there needed to be a separate organization to address the issues of the women living here in the barrios, because one of the things is that there were language barriers, there were issues of legal status, and there was there was police brutality everywhere, but you needed to address it here within the confines of East LA. And so, but what she really focused a lot of her time on was legislation. Because at that time, I don't know what all the different legislative bodies was, but she saw that community-based organizing wasn't going to really do anything, because it was the legislators who were controlling their lives. And so she worked with the legal community to try to find out what was the latest legislation coming on, like the Talmadge Amendment was during my time with her, and that was one of the first work for where you had to work and before you could get paid, or no, you wouldn't get paid. You would have to work in order to get your welfare check. So even whatever the concept was, that at least the people on welfare weren't lazy, shiftless, home breeding, and so it didn't even require them to be paid the hourly wage. Okay, they just in order for them to get the welfare check, they would have to work so many hours. And so what she tried to do was raise community awareness to get people to pressure their legislators to vote against this. And it got passed. But that was one of the major things that she tried to do is try to get support against the legislation that was controlling the women's the life. What the women got or what the families got wasn't very much. Okay. Like before food stamps, there was the food commodities, and that was yucky stuff. Okay, the canned, I don't know how old, you know how you have expiration date, I don't know how old the food was, but it was yucky. And you would get it in bulk, and it wouldn't be much. but you would get bulk beans, bulk butter, and cheese, yeah. And then you would go to a community, and then you would get meat from somewhere else, and you got a voucher to have meat, and maybe you could have meat once a week or once every 2 weeks. It would really depend, but it wasn't something that was, you weren't going to have a thriving. It wasn't the healthiest meal. You'd have to go stand in line 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning at the welfare department in order to be seen, rain or shine, and they were only going to see so many. And if they didn't see you, well, then you had to come back the next day. You were treated like, you know, in the Scarlet Letter, women on welfare rights, they were treated like they were branded, like as if they had an A. And so aid workers would treat you that way, everybody treated you that way, and all your decisions were questioned. How you raised your child, how you cooked your decisions about sex, your decisions about being with a man, getting pregnant. Why should we give you, if you got pregnant, why did you get pregnant in the first place? So it was a very intimidating process, very hostile to the 23rd power. And one of the things that Alicia tried to do was they started a restaurant. They tried to become independent. They tried to establish some kind of enterprise that would free them. But unfortunately, they tried to use their own capital, which was the welfare check. And so it was either, you know, getting the money together to, what they did was they had a little restaurant, they would make it at their homes, and then they would sell it to the social workers at the welfare department. But they never got any capital to really establish the business, so they really weren't going to be able to do much with that.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Question?
My question is for Lydia.
Okay.
Could you say a bit more about what it was like challenging the power of the Catholic Church from your perspective as a Baptist? And also, what do you think what's the impact of Catholicism for that aspect on the church?
I was raised a Baptist. By the time I'm in the movement, I'm no longer a Baptist, but I'm going to the Church of the Epiphany, which is an Episcopal church. The only criticism I ever got from my father was, "Mija, what are you doing? It's not even your church." But again, it was something that we were doing as a family. There are some people in this room who were part of some of those meetings with the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church, and they had shouting matches with McIntyre. He was physical. It was very combative. This was at a time when the Roman Catholic Church, and it's hard for me to be critical of the church, although I have this history because it's not my pew. But what was happening at that time is that they did not have, any outreach to our community, and they were the major landowner. They had enormous resources, but none of it was coming into this community. So that was one of the very, very strong tenets of Católicos por la Raza. Invest in this community. Do something about the needs of this community. It was after this, although the church would not fess up to it. After this, that there's then Bishop Arsupe that comes into town, and McIntyre is out, and Tim Manning comes in, and he has a whole different way of dealing with the conflict and the changes that have to then take place. And a lot of changes do take place, and now there's so many of the masses that are done in Spanish, and the majority of the population is represented by the people that we were fighting for. So it was a tough thing. the people that were the leadership, like Richard Cruz and Richard Martinez and others that are here, they had to pay a heavy price personally. Richard Cruz was, there was a fight not to give him a license when he graduated, not to admit him to the bar. And I remember we went to those hearings to try to advocate for him. Richard Martinez was arrested and had to do time in jail because of the Católicos por la Raza event. Alicia Escalante had to go to jail. There were somebody else that went to jail too, but I mean, these were people that paid a price for trying to change the church. And thankfully it changed. It's a huge institution that has so much more to do. We have seen the recent things that have happened in the Roman Catholic Church. There's just some institutional things that have to take place. It's at the very core of who they are, and it's not going to be something that is going to be changed by, you know, a ragtag group of Chicanos going up to the chancery and saying, you know, change.
Okay. Just one more minute and then we'll get our wrap up.
The big issue at that moment with Católicos por la Raza was that the best education available in East LA was the Catholic Church, okay? And in terms of the investments, they were closing down the church, the schools. And the thing about Católicos at St. Basil's is that they were closing down a major Catholic high school. So,
all-female high school.
Queen of Angels. And at the same time they were building, or they had just completed the building of St. Basil's, which was over $1 billion. And so that's why the protest was held at the St. Basil's, because it had just been opened. And when I was with Richard and Richard Martinez, my husband, and Richard Cruz and Pat Borfon, when we went in there, and really we just wanted to talk to Mahoney.
No,
McIntyre. We just wanted to talk to McIntyre, and they told us he wasn't there. And then one of the guys saw McIntyre walking through the door, walking down the hallway, and he said, "There he is here." Because we were good little students, we were waiting for him. And then we saw that they lied to us and he was there. So one of the guys, I don't know who, opened the door and said, "He's here, he's here." And so we, Mark Garcia. And so as we were trying, we said, Cardone McIntyre, we want to talk to you and talk about the Mexican community. And so I remember, I think it was Richard Cruz who says that, and then one of these, you know, holy men of peace goes, sass, right in the stomach, you know. And then another one goes, I don't know who was in front of him, but there was somebody else, and he was some kind of judo chop on the other guys. And it was like, you were astounded because there was a lot of respect for these people, and we didn't expect to be assaulted by men of the cloth. Now we don't live it on. And so when we go into finally we have a meeting with him, and he says he doesn't want to talk to us, and he said, well, what we want to talk about is the closing of the schools. Don't close the schools. You know, that's the only quality education that we are really getting, and it's the future of the Chicano community. And he says, I don't care what happens to the Mexicans. And we were all, what? Don't tell us that. But, and so Raul, I think, challenged him and said, what do you mean you don't care? But that was the big issue of what Católico por la Raza, why it blew up, was that we saw the problem with education, we saw this contradiction with St. Basil's, we actually met them. At the time, there were other things going on before St. Basil's in New Mexico with the church. So there were a lot of things going on, but this is what happened in LA.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now with this, we will conclude. Thank you very much for the panelists. You guys were wonderful. Let's give them another round of applause.